I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week we are going to be breaking down the Best Actor category, who I think will get nominated, as well as a couple of possible contenders to help you with your decisions as to who will get nominated. Well, you guys showed a lot of support on last week's episode with the Best Actress category, so please continue to do that. I make these videos to hear your guys' thoughts, your comments, so feel free to do that below. And then feel free to subscribe to the channel as well. We do Oscar deep dives at a minimum once a week, Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. But as we get further along into the Oscar season, of course, we're going to give, more accurate Golden Globe predictions and then Oscars and all the other kind of great stuff that comes along the way for award season. Still very early on into the season, but really having a lot of fun making these videos, so I hope you enjoy them. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is break down a different Oscar category. We're going to do the big, popular ones of the acting, but then eventually later on, we're going to go into international feature and editing and do deep dives into those videos as well. But we also like to talk about some other things when they come up, things like Golden Globe predictions or Critics' Choice, or how those award shows ultimately affect the Oscars, being the big one because this is our Old's Oscar Countdown. And as always, if you want to hear my thoughts on particular people, you can use the timestamps in the description below. To jump past this introduction and just get into the predictions or talk about possible contenders, feel free to use that at your will. And getting into things, starting off with my first prediction, I'm going to go with Adrien Brody for The Brutalist. And the Best Actor category, I think, is very similar to the Best Actress category in that they're both pretty volatile, but volatile in different ways. The Actress category, I think I'm confident about 2 people will get nominated of the 5 that I predicted, but I'm kind of confident that Mikey Madison will probably win for Anora, or at least be in the conversation. Whereas the Best Actor category, I'm actually pretty confident in my 5 nominations, definitely 4 out of the 5 nominations, that they will get nominated, but who's going to win? I really don't know that answer. I think it's really up in the air. There's 3, maybe even 4 people that could legitimately win this prize. But I went with Adrien Brody in my first slot because he's got a lot of things going for him. First off, I've seen The Brutalist. I know not a lot of people have. I had the pleasure of seeing it and was lucky enough to see it at TIFF. And the performance itself is so involved. I think a lot of people think it's a biopic, even though it's not. It feels like this real person who lived this great life, and Adrien Brody breathes so much life into this character of Laszlo Toth. So I think there's a testament to the fact that everyone in my screening thought, wait, is this based on a true story? Is this a real biopic? It's not, but it feels that way because of how much attention to detail Brody brings to this character. It's a very tortured performance, physically demanding in many ways, so you can see moments of enthusiasm and passion, but also heartbreak. There's a huge range of emotions that Brody brings to this movie. So I think the performance is absolutely deserving of a win, and the kind of almost showy, big form of acting that the Academy has appreciated, like in the past. Then, of course, he's a part of the movie The Brutalist, which I do believe to be a serious Oscar contender. I think it's going to get 10, 11 Oscar nominations. So it always helps when we look at things like acting wins or even acting nominations. It helps to be in a movie that the Academy really well likes, because if they like the movie, well, they like all the different parts of the movie. The acting, the cinematography, what have you. And Brody, I think, falls into this camp beautifully. And then I guess the third big reason why I think he can win is because of the distributor. This was picked up by A24, and A24 has a great track record of getting their movies nominated, but in particular overperforming in terms of acting wins. If you remember Brendan Fraser for The Whale, that wasn't a guarantee that he was going to win the year that he did, but then A24 did enough campaigning and did the right things for the Academy to ultimately give him the win. Same thing with someone like a Yu Jun-yun for Minari, or you could say Jamie Lee Curtis for Everything Everywhere All at Once. These are performances that going into Oscar night, or even at the beginning of the Oscar season, you wouldn't really think we're going to get nominated, let alone kind of win, in the case of something like a Jamie Lee Curtis or a Yu Jun-yun, especially early on in the season. But A24 clearly did a good enough job, in particular with their actors, to get them the wins, even going back all the way to something like Moonlight and Mahershala Ali. They have demonstrated their success at getting their actors wins at the Oscars. So I think that the fact that A24 has The Brutalist is a good sign for that. And then sometimes when we talk about the acting categories, it helps to think of it in terms of narratives. Sometimes we go, it's Julianne Moore's year, and we give it to her, just like we like the fact that Brendan Fraser was on a bit of a comeback for The Whale and gave a great performance, and he hasn't been in movies for a long time, so let's give him the win. I think Adrien Brody has a mini narrative in that sense. He won for The Pianist back in the early 2000s, 02. And he was seen, I think, by a lot of people as the next De Niro. He was and still is the youngest person to ever win the Best Lead Actor prize. Now, his career, I don't think went as well as maybe some people thought it would. But more recently, with his roles in the Wes Anderson stuff and Winning Time and Blonde, he's starting to go back into more prestigious type of movies. And I think there is this sort of mini comeback of, hey, Adrien, we thought you were going to be the next great thing in the 2000s. We had a bit of a rocky career getting there, but we know you've had this in you all along. And once again, The Brutalist is that kind of a performance of the kind of pianist kind of a caliber. So we know the Academy in particular does like Brody. So a bit of a comeback narrative, strong distributor in A24, and a really involved performance. Trust me, as someone who has seen it, it is the type of performance that is definitely capable of winning. So I have it right now in my pole position to win and definitely get nominated. Then in my second slot, I have Ralph Fiennes for Conclave, and I think this is a slam dunk of a nomination. Less confident of its chances to win, but I am very confident it will get nominated. I talked about a couple weeks ago why I think Conclave will get nominated. Very entertaining movie, but has enough air of prestige because of the kind of beautiful setting and actors involved that it will be ultimately appreciated by the Academy, but it's still entertaining enough to be appeal to kind of the wide mass of the growing Academy. So I think Conclave is a movie that will get nominated for Best Picture. And if you think Conclave is getting nominated for Best Picture, well, I think you also have to at least appreciate the performance of Ralph Fiennes. He is in pretty much every single scene. He is the go-between between all the different kind of camps of the Cardinals as they try to elect who's going to be the next pope. He is stoic, he is noble, he's very witty within the movie, and so much of the movie, I think, relies upon him and his ability to navigate these rooms and be a compelling movie star type charisma. I think his chance to win would be a more of a narrative chance that it's his time to win. He's never won an Oscar before, even though he feels like an actor who has won an Oscar, because he's been in multiple Best Picture winners of The English Patient or Schindler's List, and he's got, great movies in the 90s, but then, Harry Potter and Voldemort through the 2000s, or something like Grand Budapest Hotel with Wes Anderson. I think he's beloved by multiple generations. So if people really want to go, you know what, Ralph Fiennes doesn't have an Oscar, let's finally give him one, this will definitely be, an opportunity to do that. But we have seen in more recent years that because of the growing status of the Academy, those narratives aren't as powerful as they were back even in the 2010s, which is why, Olivia Colman will beat out Glenn Close because she's in a more well-liked movie, in the same way that, Anthony Hopkins will beat out Chadwick Boseman because he's in a more well-liked movie. Ultimately, I think the performance matters the most, which is why I have Ralph Fiennes in the second slot. He has a strong narrative, yes, but this performance, I've seen the movie, it is not as involved or emotionally impactful or as kind of big and showy as something like Adrien Brody in The Brutalist. It's very solid, it's very great work, he's very captivating, but it's a little bit more reserved. He doesn't have a huge showy scene, a little bit more noble, very engaging for sure, but I don't know if it's like you're walking out of the movie going, wow, Ralph Fiennes, best performance he's ever made. It's solid, it's great, he's in a movie that's going to be well-liked, so he will get nominated, but his chances for a win, I'm a little bit less sure about, unless that kind of narrative of, it's his time, let's give it to him until that kind of picks up. But like I said, we've seen the power of the narrative really decline in recent years with the expansion of the larger Academy and those international voters. But my third prediction I have is Colman Domingo for Sing Sing. And I talked about on my Best Picture video, I am a believer in this movie. I think it can definitely win Best Picture. Some people I see online have it in the 6th, 7th slot to get nominated. I think it should be more like 2, 3, kind of right up there in terms of a serious Best Picture contender. I think not a lot of people have seen this movie because of its odd rollout strategy, which is a shame because I do think it is a fantastic movie and also a movie that will appeal to the Oscars. I talked about, my reasoning for why it's going to get Best Picture in that video, but Colman Domingo is a large reason why I think people will resonate to the movie. He is the kind of professional actor within this theater camp or division within this prison Sing Sing. So he is very competent. He is a professional. He is a bit of a leader in many instances, particularly in the first half of the movie. But in the second half, we see his own demons that he struggles with, and he has some very showy, emotional scenes where he kind of breaks down. So he's able to do both. He's able to be a charismatic, charming movie star, leader of this troupe, but he's also able to have those kind of vulnerabilities within his performance. It is a very fantastic performance. So if he can get nominated last year for a movie like Rustin, which isn't a Best Picture nominee, and he was the sole nominee from that movie, he can definitely get nominated for Sing Sing, because that tells us that he's well-liked enough and well-appreciated enough and well-respected enough as an actor to get nominated for a movie like Rustin, which is, he's the sole nominee for that movie. Now he's in a movie like Sing Sing, which I think will get nominated for Best Picture and be even more well-liked. The last thing I want to mention with this is also that he is one of the few professional actors in a group of many non-professional actors. Sometimes the Academy can be a little bit weird about not wanting to reward non-professional actors, because sometimes I think the Academy thinks, oh, they're just playing themselves, right? They're not necessarily acting. So if that's the case, it's easy to kind of have the support of the movie go towards someone like a Colman Domingo. I still think someone like a Clarence Macklin in something like Best Supporting Actor has a real shot to win, so I think he'll get nominated there. So I don't think that bias will necessarily happen, but for the people who are a little bit more biased towards professional actors versus non-professional ones, Colman Domingo is the kind of easy way to show your support for this movie. So pretty confident that this will get nominated, and if Sing Sing is a real Oscar contender, like I think it is, he definitely has a shot to win as well. And then in my fourth slot, I'm also oddly confident that this one will get in, even though it's in my fourth slot, and even has a possibility to win. I'm talking about Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown. The only reason why it's in the fourth slot is because no one's seen it. We've only seen, clips of the trailer and his performance through that way. I mentioned on my Best Picture video that I believe in this movie as a Best Picture nominee. The fact that Searchlight Pictures believes in it, and they're great at getting Best Picture nominations. The fact that James Mangold is a great director who always puts out solid movies. The Academy loves music biopics. And when we talk about music biopics that get nominated for Best Picture, Bohemian Rhapsody, Maestro, Elvis, all of those actors usually get nominated for the Best Actor category in Bradley Cooper, in Rami Malek, in Austin Butler. And now we're in a similar situation here, where we have a young actor like Austin Butler, like Rami Malek, of course now being Timothée Chalamet, playing a famous person in Bob Dylan, transformative performance. He's not going to play him in his older years, so there's not going to be any kind of old age makeup or anything like that. It is kind of seemingly contained within these few years of Dylan's life. Hearing from the trailers, it does sound like he is doing his own singing, so I think that's a level of talent and respect that the Academy will have if he does a good enough job at that. It's like, oh, he sang like Bob Dylan, he acted like Bob Dylan, it was a transformative performance. Oh, and I also like Bob Dylan. Oh, and I like Timothée Chalamet. He was nominated for Call Me By Your Name back in 2017. He was almost nominated for A Beautiful Boy the year that movie came out, and he's been in these Oscar movies, whether it be, the Dune movies, for example. He has been, well acclaimed and is always in the conversation every year, because I think a lot of people do see him as a sort of next Leonardo DiCaprio, for example. And if he really is transformative in this movie, and he's very well liked, he could potentially even win in this category, just because, like Austin Butler almost won, just like Rami Malek did win for Bohemian Rhapsody. The Academy ultimately loves music biopics. They love biopics in general. I mean, look at someone like Cillian Murphy winning for this category last year, playing Oppenheimer. They love biopics. If A Complete Unknown is good enough, as long as it's not a complete disaster, I think it has a very strong chance of getting nominated for Best Picture. And if it's a well-liked movie, it will be on the back of the performance, the transformative performance that I'm betting on Timothée Chalamet to give us. Then my fifth prediction, I have Daniel Craig for Queer. And like I mentioned, the top four I'm pretty confident in, but this fifth spot is very tricky. I couldn't find one movie that I was really passionate in that would get in here. It was a lot of, maybes, but I ultimately went with Daniel Craig, and I'll explain why. First off, I think people will respect the choice of what Daniel Craig is doing more so than they'll like the movie. I have seen the movie. Craig is excellent in it, but it is a more challenging performance. It's also a very challenging movie in just kind of how, particularly the second half plays out and how it becomes a little bit more psychedelic. But like I said, I think people respect Craig as an actor who is a major movie star. James Bond. And in many ways, he's giving himself up to a director, in this case, Luca Guadagnino, and letting him be a tool. He's very different than the James Bond character we know. He's disheveled and sweaty and not very kind of suave like he is in the James Bond movies. So I think for a lot of people, there will be some respect there of going like, oh, wow, you kind of made yourself seem a little bit less attractive than you were in the Bond movies. Funnily enough, Sean Connery, the other most iconic James Bond, did his last James Bond movie in 1983, then 4 years later, wins for The Untouchables in 1987. Now, Daniel Craig does his last Bond movie in 1921, and not 4 years later, but 3 years later, could potentially get nominated for an Oscar. I think there is some real connection there in the fact that he's been known for James Bond for a long time. He's never been nominated, but he was always well-liked as Bond. Then he has the Knives Out movies where he's also well-liked, and a chance there was maybe a possibility that he was going to get nominated for that movie. Ultimately didn't. Now he's in this kind of serious prestige movie from an auteur director distributed by A24. It is the kind of movie that kind of would get nominated. So I think people respect Craig, his decision as a big movie star to really, be a tool to Guadagnino's story and kind of beautify himself and be a little bit more disheveled in this movie. I think people and Academy members will respect that choice and respect kind of the performance that he is giving, even if they don't love the movie. And then I went back and I tried to figure out, in years where we weren't sure what the fifth nominee was going to be, what were those kinds of movies? And usually it's one of two things. It's either an actor who is really well liked, an established veteran actor, or a strong distributor gets one of their performances nominated. So if you think of the actor side, you have Willem Dafoe getting nominated for At Eternity's Gate, or Viggo Mortensen for Captain Fantastic. These are smaller movies. In the case of At Eternity's Gate, maybe similar to Queer in that it's a more challenging movie. But Willem Dafoe still gets nominated. Why? Because he's Willem Dafoe. He's very well respected. Same thing with Viggo Mortensen. So there's an element of respect of the actor, particularly older actors who have done great work. And then the second part would be a strong distributor pushing and getting their actor nominated. In the case of someone like Paul Mescal for After Sun was a smaller movie. No one had really known too much about Paul Mescal, but A24 really did a great job getting that movie seen and ultimately getting him that nomination, I would say in that kind of fifth slot in a bit of a weaker year. Daniel Craig has the benefit of both. He has a strong distributor in A24 who will make sure that this movie gets seen, and he is also the kind of big name, never been nominated before, movie star, but well respected enough now through all the Bond movies and Road to Perdition and Knives Out that he does seem like the type of actor who gives a great performance in a kind of fall film festival movie with an indie distributor like A24. Is the kind of a performance that would get nominated over some of my other possible contenders. So it's the type of performance, it's the benefit of Craig as a movie star and as a home name that I think will push him over the edge and get him nominated in a bit of a weaker year, particularly with this fifth slot. I wasn't super confident in any of the movies, and I think a lot of people are in a similar boat, but the odds are, I think, towards Craig. Now talking about some possible contenders, my first one is Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice, who is a strong possible contender. He has two movies this fall, A Different Man, which was a Sundance movie being distributed by A24, I think will be highly seen, even though he's not, I would say, the standout of the movie. That's probably Adam Pearson, but still very excellent in the movie. And then, of course, has this movie here with The Apprentice. I think everyone agrees, for the most part, that even if they don't love this movie, the performances are very well done. Stan does a great job at not doing just a complete SNL caricature of Trump. It's a little bit more subtle in how he kind of evolves into the character that we know today and kind of the mannerisms that we can all kind of mimic with someone like a Donald Trump. My ultimate concern why I didn't have him in was because I don't know how people will watch this movie or how people respond to this movie. There's so many different options of how things could go, but I think the general consensus, and we can see this a bit at the box office, is that we don't know who this movie is for, because if, let's say, in a couple of weeks Donald Trump wins the election, well, then people may be incentivized to watch the movie because they're trying to understand why people like Trump so much. But then there's probably going to be some people that aren't going to watch the movie because they're going to be so frustrated by the results of the election that they're not going to want to see more of Donald Trump. And the same thing, if Trump loses, people may go, finally, he's out of my life, I won't have to think about him. But then also, if he loses, they may be more inclined to maybe watch it because they don't have to worry about him. I'm not exactly sure where that's going to come down, which is why I left him out. I also think it's worth noting that this is being distributed in the States by Briarcliff, who is a very small distributor. So if we're talking about things like campaigning and getting nominated, Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong, I think we'll have to do a lot of that campaigning kind of on their own. So while Stan does have an increased media presence because of the success of a movie like A Different Man critically, and his role in The Apprentice here, I think does a great performance in this movie, and his post-MCU career is very fascinating and interesting. He's definitely become one of my favorite actors to watch out for. But I think that Donald Trump is too divisive of a figure that it will ultimately just turn off a large swath of the Academy that just won't watch this movie and therefore won't nominate him. And there's not going to be a strong enough distributor to really push this movie and say, hey, you have to watch this movie because it's got these amazing performances. You could also even say someone like a Jeremy Strong is the clear standout of the movie. So who knows if that will kind of overshadow Sebastian Stan. It really is tough to say, but I think you have Daniel Craig, who's a bigger name, A24, a bigger distributor, Luca Guadagnino, a bigger director. That will probably trump the biopic kind of nature and preferences that the Academy may have to something like The Apprentice. And then my final possible contender, I went with Paul Mescal for Gladiator 2. We've just heard some social media reactions. Seems like Denzel Washington is the standout, but there have been some positive celebrations of someone like a Paul Mescal in the movie. I think the gap between 5 and 6 is very close, but the gap between 6 and 7 is large. I really had a hard time figuring out a second possible contender because I'm not really passionate or really sure that Paul Mescal could get nominated. I really do think it's a top 6 that can get nominated for Best Actor. The top 4 are pretty solid unless a complete unknown is a complete disaster. And in that 5th, 6th slot, you may pick Sebastian Stan, I may pick Daniel Craig. It's a kind of flip of the coin in that sense. But I still went with Paul Mescal here as a possible contender because of some of the positive results that we've heard out of Gladiator 2. And he is a past nominee, so we know he's well-liked. And of course, the Russell Crowe character got nominated, and Gladiator was a big Oscar movie back in the 2000s. But I think it's probably a 3 to 4 technical nominations, plus a Denzel Washington nomination, and maybe a Best Picture nomination, but maybe not. I'd probably leave it out of my lineup right now, as I did a couple weeks ago, even past the social media reactions. That's kind of how I see Gladiator 2. I don't know if it's a strong enough movie that will get nominated for Best Picture, then that will help Paul Mescal get nominated. I think both of them are kind of going to be left on the outside. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please make sure to comment below and let me know your predictions for the Best Actor category. Stay tuned to next week where we're going to be talking about the Best Supporting Actress category. That will be a lot of fun. And then Best Supporting Actor, and then Best Director, and then probably Best Original Adapted Screenplay. And then next thing you know, we're off to the races and talking about all different kinds of awards and what have you. So I appreciate all the support you guys have been showing for these videos. Please do continue to do that. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.